The synapse is a neural junction site for the transmission of electrical impulses from one neuron to another neuron, gland, or muscle. Starting with the ipsilateral leg, the leg in which the stimulus occurs and begins the cross-extensor reflex, and starting with step 1, the arrival of the stimulus and activation of receptor. The foot steps on attack, activating pain impulses which initiate the cross-extensor reflex system to begin. The sensory receptor or pain receptor is now activated, sending action potentials towards the spinal cord through the pseudopolar somatic sensory neuron. Step 2, activation of the stimulus. Once the sensory neuron has been activated and signals travel from the foot into the dorsal root ganglia, which is right here, as mentioned here, into the spinal cord, which forms polysynaptic nerve endings. And here's the two polysynaptic nerve endings. Now starting with the withdrawal reflex, which leads to steps 3, 4, and 5 in the ipsilateral leg, beginning with information processing. Next, these polysynaptic nerve endings synapsed with the interneurons, right here, within the spinal cord, and then to motor neurons. Step 4, activation of motor neurons. Motor neurons are activated and send signals back to the leg through the ventral ganglia towards the extensor and flexor muscles. Quadriceps being extensor, hamstrings being the flexor. Step 5, response by effector. Once synapsed in the motor neurons, an inhibitory extensor muscle signal is sent to the quadriceps, causing them to relax. Step 5, response by effector, part 2. Once synapsed in the motor neurons, an excitatory flexor muscle signal is sent to the hamstrings, causing them to contract. This completes the withdrawal reflex within the ipsilateral leg, causing it to raise. The contralateral leg is the opposing leg which counteracts the stimulus and ultimately ends the cross-extensor reflex process. Step 3 continued in the contralateral leg now, information processing. The polysynaptic nerve endings of the sensory receptors connect to the interneurons within the spinal cord and receive the signal from the ipsilateral side of the spinal cord and cross the midline of the spinal cord via interneurons. Step 4, activation of motor neurons continuing in the contralateral leg. The interneurons synapse with the contralateral motor neurons and travel back through the ventral root ganglia towards the extensor and flexor muscles of the contralateral leg. Step 5, response by effector, part 1, completing the extensor reflex within the contralateral leg. Once activated, an excitatory extensor muscle signal is sent to the quadriceps, causing them to contract. Step 5, response by effector, part 2, completing the extensor reflex within the contralateral leg. Once activated, the inhibited flexor muscle signal is sent to the hamstrings, causing them to relax. Conclusively, the reverberation between the ipsilateral leg and the contralateral leg is excited across the midline of the spinal cord in order to stabilize the body so that the ipsilateral leg can pull back from the tack, which is the stimulus. This process is antagonistic because it involves the contralateral leg responding in opposition to the stimulus which has been felt by the ipsilateral leg. This process is an example of the positive feedback system of the chain of neurons. They will remain active once they have stimulated and will continue to stay active until synaptic fatigue, inhibitory stimuli break the cycle. The stimuli in this case would be once the ipsilateral foot is removed from the tack. The contralateral leg stays active to maintain balance.